This 6-ingredient ciabatta is one of my most requested recipes, and you're about to find out why. It's crispy on the outside and fluffy on the inside. Let's make it together. So we're gonna start out with our flour. We're gonna need 2 cups. And as always, I am scooping it with my spoon into my measuring cup, and I'm mixing as I go to make sure that I get a really even read on my flour. There's my 2 cups of flour, and then I'm also adding in 2 teaspoons of instant yeast. If you don't have instant yeast, you can also use active dry yeast. Just add your water in first. I love recipes where you can just throw everything into a bowl, give it a mix, leave it and forget it, and this is one of those recipes. It's perfect for beginners. Next thing we're gonna do is 1/2 teaspoon sugar, and this is just gonna help our yeast to activate faster. And then also just a little sprinkle of salt, because we always add salt to everything when we're baking. It really brings out the flavor. And then I'm just gonna grab a little spatula, give this a very quick mix. And our last ingredient is, of course, warm water, not hot, warm water, and I'm gonna grab it right now. You know, I've heard so many times, oh, I can't start baking because I don't have a thermometer, but you honestly do not need one. You can just kind of eyeball your hot water. I promise it'll work out perfectly fine. So we're gonna give this a really good mix. And like I said, this is a no-knead recipe, and what that means is that you really don't need to use your hands to get in there and knead. You could do this in like a wedding dress and never get dirty. And that's what I really love about it. But if you do want to get down and dirty, then there is some modifications you can make, which I will let you know in a little bit. This is a really wet and sticky dough, and you might not see that at the beginning when you're mixing. It might be a little dry, but a kind of good mixing technique is to push with the back of your spatula to really let that flour absorb all of the water. Once there's not an inch of dry flour left in your dough, just scrape everything towards the middle to make a very rough and shaggy ball. And then we're just gonna cover this and let this sit for an hour and a half. But if you wanna get down and dirty, like I said, and you wanna have a really bubbly ciabatta, if you have the time, instead of waiting an hour and a half, wait 30 minutes and come back and I'll tell you what you need to do next. Okay, so if you've decided to do the advanced version, then your dough has now been rising for 30 minutes, and if you don't want to do this, it's totally okay. You'll have an equally as delicious and beautiful loaf of bread, and you can use this timestamp that I'm going to leave somewhere on the screen to just skip to the next step. But if you're here for the advanced step, what we're going to do after 30 minutes is uncover our dough, and it should have already risen a little bit, so you can see these beautiful bubbles that are already rising. And what we're going to do now is called a stretch and fold. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of take wet hands, so I'm going to wet my hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the first corner of the dough with my hands and just pull it up as far as it will go, and then fold it over the rest of the dough. This is called a stretch and fold, and what it does is that it allows the dough to build the gluten and build those beautiful bubbles that give you your really airy and light ciabatta. So I'm gonna turn my dough 45 degrees and continue to do this 4 times all the way around, pulling as far as it will go and then folding it back on top of the rest of my dough. You can go around and do this like 4 to 8 times until your dough has kind of come together into a little ball in the middle. And once you've washed your hands, you're gonna grab your saran wrap, cover your dough, and put it back to rise for another 30 minutes. So you're gonna do the same thing in another 30 minutes, so you're gonna have 2 stretch and folds in total. And after that, you're gonna let it rise for another hour until you have a beautiful, bubbly, and ready to shape dough. Okay, now that it's been an hour and a half, our dough is fully risen, and just watch this pull. It's insane. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab a baking sheet that's lined with parchment paper. So I already have one ready here. And then we're gonna grab some flour, and we're gonna be very heavy-handed on the flour here. We're gonna grab just like a little handful and drizzle it all over the parchment paper, because this dough is very, very, very stretchy. I'm gonna add very, very, very sticky, not stretchy, also stretchy. But I'm gonna add a little bit more here. And then I'm gonna grab my dough and kind of just pull it out, using my hands to just get it onto that piece of parchment paper. The dough is very sticky, but honestly, it's still a super easy dough to work with. So what we're gonna do is kind of just rub it into that flour and spread it out with our hands. And you can also use a spatula at this point, so that, like I was saying, you could go completely without touching the stove if you wanted to, but I like to get in there with my hands. So we're just gonna spread it out along that piece of parchment paper until you get like a nice big rectangle. And you can also just flip it as you go to coat both sides of that dough with flour, because you really want to have a lot of flour on both sides of the dough to make sure it doesn't stick and you get a beautiful loaf coming out of the oven. And there you go. So what you can do at this point, you'll see that you have these awesome little bubbles forming too. What you can do is you can leave it as a loaf like this, or you can cut it into 4 pieces, you can cut it into 2, or you can cut it into 6. It's really up to you. So I'm going to grab my bench cut scraper because I'm going to cut mine into 4 pieces. Here, so I'm just going to draw a little line down the middle and then just one this way to make it into 4 pieces. But again, you can do 2 to make it into like baguettes. You can do just 1, make it into a loaf, or you can do 6 to make them into smaller little breads. And kind of just pull those apart with your hands so they're separated. And that's it. You have one little decision to make here. So if you want, you can brush the top with water and then add any toppings. You can do sesame seeds, you can do herbs and cheese, you can do cinnamon and sugar. It's really up to you here, but I'm going to leave mine plain for today. So once you've added any toppings that you want, your bread is ready to go into the oven. We're going to bake it at 425 degrees for 25 minutes approximately, and we're going to use a water bath. So here's what I mean by a water bath. We're going to take an empty dish tray and put it into the oven, and right on top is going to be our ciabatta breads. And then what we're going to do is grab some boiling water, and we're going to pour that boiling water into the baking dish that's under our ciabatta bread. We're going to close that really quickly. So what this is going to do is that it's going to create steam in the oven, so that way our ciabatta is going to get a crispy exterior and it's going to rise much better. After 10 minutes, you're going to take this water bath out, move your ciabatta to the bottom rack, and let it bake for another 15 minutes. And my beautiful ciabatta is ready to go. You guys need to smell my kitchen. It smells unreal right now, and the only way to smell it is to make it for yourself. Just look at the crust on these things. Do you hear that? I'm so excited to give these a try. I need to cut into this and show you the inside. It's absolutely unbelievable. I do not have the patience to wait. These look way too good. Look at how perfect, oh my gosh, the steam coming off of these things. The crumb is just perfectly baked, and I can't wait to eat these for dinner. Thank you so much for watching this video. The full written recipe will be in the description below, and don't forget to subscribe for so much more.